Captain Marcus Sterling had served the royal family for 15 years. His strong build and sharp eyes made him perfect for protecting the palace. Today was different, though. After many years of faithful service, he was finally getting a replacement. The palace had chosen Thomas Reed, a younger man with impressive credentials from the military academy. Marcus felt mixed emotions about stepping down. He loved his job, but his wife Sarah had been asking him to spend more time at home. Their daughter Emma was growing up fast, and he had missed too many school plays and birthday parties because of his duties. The new position as head of palace. Security would mean regular hours and weekends off. The handover ceremony was scheduled for next week. Thomas had already completed his training and background checks. Everyone seemed impressed with his performance during the trial period. The young man was confident, well-trained, and eager to take on the responsibility. Marcus had watched him during training sessions and felt satisfied that the royal family would be in good hands. However, something bothered Marcus. Call it instinct or experience, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to test Thomas. One more time, not in a controlled training environment, but in real situations where anything could happen. The royal family trusted Marcus completely. He wanted to make absolutely sure his replacement deserved that same trust. That evening, Marcus sat in his study thinking about how to conduct this test. He couldn't simply ask Thomas to prove himself again. The young man might become defensive or suspicious. Marcus needed a way to observe Thomas naturally, without him knowing he was being watched. Then an idea struck him. The annual spring festival was coming up in 2 weeks. Thousands of tourists would flood the capital city to see the parade and festivities. The royal family always made public appearances during this time, which meant security had to be perfect. This would be the ideal opportunity to test Thomas. Under real pressure, Marcus decided he would disguise himself as a tourist during the festival. He would blend into the crowd and watch how Thomas handled the security arrangements. If Thomas was truly ready for the job, he would manage everything smoothly. If there were any problems or weaknesses, Marcus would spot them before. It was too late. The plan seemed perfect, but Marcus knew he had to be careful. His face was well known around the palace, and many security staff might recognize him. He would need a good disguise and a believable story about why he was there. He also couldn't tell anyone about his plan, not even his wife Sarah. Over the next few days, Marcus quietly prepared for his undercover mission. He bought casual tourist clothes, a different style of glasses, and even changed his hairstyle. He studied the festival schedule and planned his route through the city. He wanted to be everywhere the royal family would appear, watching Thomas. Manage the security from different angles. The more Marcus thought about it, the more important this test became. The royal family's safety depended on the head of security making good decisions under pressure. Thomas looked good on paper, but real situations were different from training exercises. Crowds were unpredictable, threats could come from anywhere, and split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. Marcus remembered his own early days as head of security. He had made mistakes that could have been serious if more experienced guards hadn't been watching. He had learned from those mistakes and become better because of them. Now, he wanted to make sure Thomas wouldn't make similar errors when it really mattered. As the festival approached, Marcus felt both excited and nervous about his plan. He was excited to see how Thomas would perform, but nervous about what he might discover. What if Thomas wasn't ready? What if there were security gaps that could put the royal family in danger? These thoughts kept Marcus awake at night. Sarah noticed that her husband seemed distracted, but she assumed it was normal stress about his career change. She was looking forward to having him home more often and didn't want to add to his worries by asking too many questions. Marcus felt guilty about not telling her the truth, but he knew she would try to talk him out of the plan. The night before the festival, Marcus laid out his tourist disguise and reviewed his plan one final time. He would arrive early at the first parade location and position himself where he could see both the royal family and Thomas. He had memorized the security protocols and would watch for any deviations or problems. Marcus also prepared for different scenarios. If he spotted a real security threat that Thomas missed, he would have to act quickly without blowing his cover. If everything went smoothly, he would simply observe and take notes. Either way, by the end of the festival, he would know whether Thomas was truly ready to protect the royal family as he went to bed that night. Marcus thought about the irony of the situation. Here he was, a loyal guard who had spent 15 years protecting the royal family, now preparing to spy on his own replacement. But he knew it was the right thing to do. The safety of the people he had sworn to protect was more important than protocol or hurt feelings. Tomorrow would reveal whether Thomas Reed was the right choice for the job, whether Marcus had made a terrible mistake in recommending him. The festival would be the ultimate test, and Marcus would be watching every moment of it from the shadows, ready to act if necessary. The stage was set for a day that would change everything Marcus thought he knew about loyalty, trust, and the true meaning of protecting those who depended on him. The morning of the spring festival arrived with perfect weather. Marcus woke up early and carefully put on his tourist disguise. The casual clothes felt strange after years of wearing his formal uniform. He looked at himself in the mirror and was satisfied that he looked like any other middle-aged tourist visiting the capital for the festival. Sarah was still sleeping when Marcus quietly left the house. He had told her he was going to the palace early to help with final preparations, which wasn't completely untrue. He was planning to help, just not in the way she imagined. The streets were already filling with excited tourists carrying cameras and wearing festival souvenirs. Marcus bought a cheap camera and a festival hat from a street vendor to complete his disguise. Practiced walking differently, slouching his shoulders and moving less purposefully than his usual military stride. The first event was the royal parade. Through the old city center, Marcus arrived an hour early and found a good spot near the fountain where he could see the entire route. He watched as Thomas and his security team began setting up barriers and positioning guards. Everything looked professional and well organized. From a distance, as tourists gathered around him, Marcus listened to their conversations and tried to blend in. A family from the countryside stood next to him. Their teenage daughter was excited about seeing the princess for the first time. An elderly couple behind him discussed the history of the festival. Marcus found it interesting to experience the event from this perspective after years of only seeing it from the security side. When Thomas appeared to inspect the security arrangements, Marcus studied his every move. The young man looked confident and in control. He spoke clearly into his radio, checked sightlines, and positioned his guards strategically. So far, everything seemed perfect. But then Marcus noticed something that made his stomach tighten. There was a gap in the security perimeter near the old church. It was small, but big enough for someone to slip through if they were determined. Marcus watched to see if Thomas would spot it during his inspection. Thomas walked past the area twice without seeming to notice the gap. Marcus felt his first wave of concern. It might be nothing, but in security work, small oversights could become big problems. He made a mental note and continued watching. The royal family arrived right on schedule. The crowd cheered as the golden carriage appeared, escorted by mounted guards in ceremonial uniforms. Princess Catherine waved to the crowd while Prince James sat beside her looking slightly bored. The Queen and King followed in a second carriage, smiling and acknowledging the enthusiastic crowd as the parade moved slowly through the designated route. Marcus kept his eyes on Thomas and the security team. Jobs well, scanning the crowd and staying alert. But Marcus noticed that one guard near the church seemed distracted, talking to a pretty young woman instead of watching for threats. Marcus moved closer to get a better view of the situation. The distracted guard was laughing and clearly enjoying his conversation with the woman. This was exactly the kind of behavior that could lead to serious problems. Where was Thomas? Why wasn't he correcting this guard's behavior? Looking around, Marcus spotted Thomas near the royal carriages, focused on the immediate area around the royal family. He wasn't monitoring his team effectively. A good security leader needed to watch everything, not just the obvious targets. Marcus felt his second wave of concern growing stronger. The parade continued without incident, but Marcus was no longer feeling confident about Thomas's performance. 2 problems in the first hour wasn't a good sign, as the royal family moved. Toward the next event location, Marcus followed at a distance, determined to continue his observation. The second event was a public reception in the palace gardens. This was always more challenging from a security perspective because the crowd could move around freely instead of staying behind barriers. Thomas would need to manage multiple access points, roving guards, and unpredictable crowd movements. Marcus bought a festival program and joined the crowd entering the gardens. The setting was beautiful, with flower displays, musicians, and food vendors, creating a festive atmosphere. But Marcus wasn't there for the scenery. He was watching Thomas coordinate his team for this more complex security challenge. At first, everything seemed well organized. Guards were posted at all the obvious positions, and the royal family was surrounded by a discreet but effective protective circle. Thomas appeared confident as he moved around the gardens, checking on his team and monitoring the crowd, but Marcus's trained eye continued to spot problems. The guard at the east gate was checking invitations too casually, barely glancing at them before waving people through. The team near the refreshment area had bunched together instead of spreading out to cover more ground. Most seriously, there was no guard watching the service entrance where catering staff were coming and going. Marcus felt increasingly uncomfortable with what he was seeing. These weren't major disasters, but they were the kind of small security lapses that could be exploited by someone with bad intentions. A truly professional security operation should have no such gaps. As he watched Thomas manage the situation, Marcus began to understand the problem. The young man was technically competent and knew all the right procedures, but he lacked the instinctive awareness that came with experience. He was following the security plan perfectly, but he wasn't adapting to the real situation unfolding around him. This realization hit Marcus hard. He had recommended Thomas based on his impressive credentials and strong performance in training exercises. But training was different from reality. In real situations, security leaders needed to think on their feet and spot problems that weren't. In any manual, the reception continued peacefully, and most tourists had no idea that anything was wrong. The royal family mingled with guests, posed for photos, and enjoyed the beautiful afternoon. From their perspective, the security was invisible and effective, which was exactly how it should be. But Marcus knew better. I had seen enough small problems to understand that Thomas wasn't ready for the full responsibility of protecting the royal family. The young man needed more training, more experience, and more time to develop the instincts that made the difference between good security and truly professional security. As the afternoon event concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus felt the weight of his discovery. He had hoped to confirm that Thomas was ready to take over. Instead, he had uncovered serious concerns about his replacement's ability to handle the job. The question now was what to do about it. The final event of the festival was the evening gala at the Grand Ballroom. This was always the most challenging security assignment because it involved a formal dinner with hundreds of guests, including foreign dignitaries, business leaders, and celebrities. Marcus knew this would be the ultimate test of Thomas's abilities. As evening approached, Marcus changed into the formal attire required for gala guests. He had managed to obtain an invitation through a friend in the diplomatic service, claiming he wanted to attend as a private citizen now that he was stepping down from his security role. It wasn't entirely false, just incomplete. The grand ballroom was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers, elegant decorations, and tables set with the finest china and silverware. Marcus had supervised security for this event many times, but he had never actually experienced it as a guest. Despite his concerns about Thomas, he couldn't help but appreciate the beauty of the setting. As guests arrived and began socializing, Marcus positioned himself where he could observe both the security arrangements and the crowd. He recognized many of the attendees from previous events, including several foreign ambassadors, prominent business leaders, and members of the royal family's extended social circle. Thomas appeared to be managing the security well at first glance. Guards were stationed at all entrances, the perimeter was secure, and the royal family was properly protected. But Marcus's experienced eye quickly began to spot the same types of problems he had seen earlier in the day. The most concerning issue was the kitchen entrance. Marcus knew from his years of experience that catering staff often became careless. During large events, propping open doors for convenience and failing to properly check credentials. When he walked past the area during cocktail hour, he saw exactly what he feared. A service door was propped open with a chair, and catering staff were moving in and out freely without any security checks. This was a serious vulnerability that could allow an unauthorized person to enter the building undetected. Thomas should have assigned a dedicated guard to monitor this entrance, but apparently he hadn't considered it important enough. Marcus also noticed that the security team seemed less alert than they should be during such a high-profile event. Several guards were standing too close together, making casual conversation instead of scanning the crowd. Others appeared distracted by the elegant surroundings and well-dressed guests. During the dinner service, Marcus observed another troubling incident. A waiter dropped a tray of glasses near the royal table, causing a loud crash that startled everyone in the area. The royal family's immediate bodyguards reacted appropriately, moving closer to their charges and scanning for threats. But Thomas and his team were slow to respond, taking several seconds to assess the situation and react. In a real emergency, those seconds could be critical. Marcus knew that security teams needed to respond instantly to any unexpected event, even something as innocent as dropped dishes. The delayed reaction suggested that Thomas's team wasn't maintaining the proper level of alertness as the evening progressed. Marcus noticed more subtle problems with the security arrangements. The lighting in certain areas created blind spots that weren't being monitored. The seating arrangement put some guests closer to the royal family than security protocols normally allowed. The background music was loud enough to interfere with radio communications between security team members. None of these issues were immediately dangerous. Together, they painted a picture of a security operation that wasn't quite professional enough for protecting the royal family. Marcus felt increasingly troubled by what he was witnessing. The most serious incident occurred during the dancing portion of the evening. A guest who had clearly had too much to drink began approaching the royal table in an aggressive manner. Apparently upset about some political issue, this was exactly the type of situation that required immediate and professional intervention. Marcus watched as Thomas noticed the situation and began moving toward the intoxicated guest. But his approach was hesitant and uncertain. Instead of quickly and discreetly removing the man from the area, Thomas seemed unsure about how to handle the confrontation without causing a scene. The situation escalated when the drunk guest raised his voice and began making demands about speaking directly to the king. Other guests began to notice the commotion, and the atmosphere in the ballroom became tense. This was exactly the kind of incident that could ruin a royal event if not handled properly. Marcus felt his instincts taking over. Years of training and experience told him to intervene immediately. But he forced himself to remain in his tourist role and watch how Thomas would handle the crisis. This was, after all, exactly why he had planned this test. Thomas eventually managed to coordinate with his team to remove the disruptive guest, but the process was clumsy and took far too long. By the time the man was escorted out, many guests had noticed the disturbance, and the royal family looked uncomfortable. A more experienced security leader would have handled the situation much more smoothly and discreetly. After the incident, Marcus noticed that Thomas appeared shaken and uncertain. The young man was clearly competent in routine situations, but he struggled when faced with unexpected challenges that required quick thinking and decisive action. As the gala concluded, and guests began to leave, Marcus reflected on everything he had observed throughout the day. The evidence was clear. Thomas Reed was not ready to take full responsibility for the royal family's security. He had the basic skills and knowledge, but he lacked the experience and instincts necessary for the job. This realization created a serious dilemma for Marcus. The handover ceremony was scheduled for next week, and everyone expected him to step down as planned. His wife was looking forward to having him home more often, and the palace administration had already made arrangements for his new role. But Marcus knew he couldn't in good conscience turn over the royal family's safety to someone who wasn't fully prepared for the responsibility. The security gaps he had observed could potentially be exploited by someone with malicious intentions. The royal family's lives could be at risk. As Marcus drove home that night, still wearing his formal gala attire, he knew he faced one of the most difficult decisions of his career. Should he speak up about his concerns and delay the transition, even though it would be awkward and potentially embarrassing for everyone involved? Or should he trust that Thomas would improve with time and experience? The weight of 15 years of faithful service to the royal family pressed down on him. His primary duty had always been their safety and security, regardless of personal considerations or political complications. That duty didn't end just because he was planning to step down from his position. Marcus realized that his undercover observation had revealed more than just Thomas's shortcomings. It had also shown him that his own sense of responsibility, too. The royal family was stronger than he had realized. Even dressed as a tourist, watching from the crowd, he couldn't simply walk away from his commitment to protecting them. Marcus spent a sleepless night weighing his options. By morning, he had made his decision, but he knew it wouldn't be easy to execute. He needed to find a way to address the security concerns without destroying Thomas's career or creating a scandal that would embarrass the palace administration. His first step was to document everything he had observed during the festival. Marcus sat at his desk and wrote detailed notes about each security lapse, the timing of incidents, and the potential risks involved. He tried to be objective and fair, focusing on facts rather than personal opinions about Thomas's performance. The documentation process helped. Marcus organized his thoughts and confirmed his concerns. When he saw all the problems listed on paper, he realized the situation was even more serious than he had initially thought. There were too many issues to ignore, too many potential vulnerabilities to leave unaddressed. Marcus decided to approach Lord Chancellor Harrison, who oversaw palace security and had the authority to delay or modify the handover arrangements. Harrison was a fair and practical man who would listen to legitimate concerns. But he would also expect solid evidence and reasonable solutions before requesting a meeting with the Lord Chancellor. Marcus wanted to give Thomas one more chance. Perhaps the young man had simply been nervous during his first major public event. Maybe a direct conversation would reveal that. Thomas was aware of the problems and had plans to address them. Marcus called Thomas and suggested they meet for coffee to discuss the transition and share some final insights. Thomas seemed pleased by the invitation, apparently seeing it as a mentoring opportunity with his respected predecessor. They met at a quiet cafe near the palace, and Marcus carefully steered the conversation toward the festival events. He asked Thomas how he felt the security had gone and whether he had noticed any areas for improvement to Marcus's disappointment. Thomas seemed completely satisfied with his performance. The young man spoke confidently about how smoothly everything had gone and how well his team had performed. He didn't mention any of the problems Marcus had observed. Suggesting he hadn't noticed them at all, Marcus tried a more direct approach, asking specific questions about security protocols and crowd management. Thomas's answers were technically correct, but lacked the depth of understanding that came with real experience. He could recite the procedures perfectly, but he didn't seem to grasp the subtle complexities of applying them in real situations. When Marcus mentioned the incident with the intoxicated guest at the gala, Thomas dismissed it as a minor disturbance that had been handled appropriately. He didn't seem to understand that the lengthy response time and public nature of the removal had created exactly the kind of scene that professional security teams should prevent. After an hour of careful questioning, Marcus realized that Thomas wasn't just inexperienced, he also lacked the self-awareness to recognize his own limitations. This made the situation much more dangerous because Thomas wouldn't seek help or additional training if he didn't think he needed it. That afternoon, Marcus requested an urgent meeting with Lord Chancellor Harrison. The Lord Chancellor's office was impressive with ancient oak panels and portraits of previous palace officials. Harrison himself was a dignified man in his 60s who had served the royal family with distinction for many years. Marcus presented his documentation methodically, explaining his decision to observe the festival security and detailing each concern he had identified. He emphasized that his goal wasn't to damage Thomas's career, but to ensure the royal family's safety remained the top priority. Lord Chancellor Harrison listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. His expression grew more serious as Marcus described the security gaps and Thomas's apparent lack of awareness about them. When Marcus finished his presentation, Harrison sat quietly for several minutes, clearly weighing the implications. Finally, Harrison spoke. He thanked Marcus for his diligence and confirmed that the concerns were serious enough to warrant action. However, he also pointed out the complexity of the situation. The palace had already announced the transition. Thomas had been publicly recognized as the new head of security, and delaying the handover would raise questions that could damage confidence in the security arrangements. Harrison proposed a compromise solution. Instead of canceling Thomas's appointment, they would extend Marcus's service for an additional 6 months as a senior security advisor. During this period, Thomas would remain in his position, but under Marcus's close supervision and mentoring. This would allow Thomas to gain more experience while ensuring the royal family's safety wasn't compromised. Marcus found this solution reasonable, but he worried about how Thomas would react to the arrangement. The young man's confidence and lack of self-awareness might make him resistant to intensive supervision and correction. Harrison assured Marcus that he would handle the conversation with Thomas diplomatically, framing the extended mentoring as a valuable opportunity rather than a demotion or punishment. He would emphasize that even experienced security professionals could benefit from learning from someone with Marcus's exceptional record of service. The meeting with Thomas took place the next day in Harrison's office. Marcus was present to explain the new arrangement and answer any questions. As expected, Thomas seemed surprised and somewhat disappointed that his independent leadership role was being delayed. However, Harrison handled the situation skillfully, praising Thomas's potential. While explaining that the royal family's security was too important to rush, he pointed out that Marcus's 15 years of experience represented invaluable knowledge that shouldn't be lost, and that Thomas would benefit enormously from extended mentoring. Thomas eventually agreed to the arrangement, though Marcus could see he wasn't entirely happy about it. The young man's pride had been wounded, but he was professional enough to accept the decision and commit to making the best of the situation. After Thomas left the meeting, Harrison and Marcus discussed the implementation details. Marcus would maintain his current authority and responsibilities while gradually transferring specific duties to Thomas as his performance improved. They would meet weekly to assess progress and adjust the mentoring plan as needed. Marcus felt relieved that a solution had been found, but he also recognized the challenges ahead. He would need to be diplomatic in his criticism while being firm about security standards. Thomas would need to overcome his wounded pride and embrace the learning opportunity. Most importantly, they would both need to work together effectively to ensure the royal family remained safe. That evening, Marcus finally told Sarah about the extended assignment. She was disappointed about the delayed retirement plans, but she understood his commitment to the royal family's safety. She had always known that Marcus took his responsibilities seriously. She respected his decision to prioritize duty over personal convenience. As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he reflected on the events of the past few days. His undercover observation had revealed problems that needed to be addressed, and he had found a way to address them without destroying careers or creating scandals. The next 6 months would be challenging, but he was confident that the outcome would be worth the effort. The first month of the mentoring arrangement proved more challenging than Marcus had anticipated. Thomas's wounded pride made him defensive about criticism, and he often seemed to interpret Marcus's guidance as personal attacks rather than professional development opportunities. Marcus tried various approaches to break through Thomas's resistance. He started with positive reinforcement, praising the things Thomas did well before addressing areas for improvement. He shared stories from his own early career, including mistakes he had made and lessons he had learned. He even arranged for Thomas to meet with other experienced security professionals who could offer different perspectives. Despite these efforts, Thomas remained stubbornly convinced that his performance during the festival had been adequate. He seemed to view the extended mentoring as an unnecessary delay rather than a valuable learning opportunity. This attitude made it difficult for Marcus to address the serious security concerns he had identified. The breakthrough came during a routine security drill at the palace. Marcus had arranged for a simulated emergency to test the team's response. Procedures. The scenario involved a suspicious package discovered in the main courtyard during a public tour. Thomas's initial response was technically correct, but lacked the urgency and coordination that a real urgency would require. He followed the written procedures step by step, but he failed to adapt to unexpected complications that arose during the drill. When one of the evacuation routes became blocked, Thomas seemed confused about how to modify the plan quickly. Marcus watched the drill unfold with growing concern. The simulated emergency revealed the same problems he had observed during the festival. Thomas could follow procedures perfectly in ideal conditions, but he struggled when faced with real-world complications that required quick thinking and decisive leadership. After the drill concluded, Marcus sat down with Thomas for a detailed debriefing. This time, instead of general criticism or advice, Marcus had specific examples from the drill to discuss. He could point to exact moments when different decisions would have produced better outcomes, to Marcus's surprise. Thomas seemed genuinely shocked by the feedback. Apparently he had thought the drill had gone well and was unaware of the problems Marcus had identified. For the first time since the mentoring began, Thomas seemed open to the possibility that he might have more to learn than he had realized. This conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Thomas began asking more questions and seeking Marcus's input on daily security decisions. He started carrying a notebook to record insights and lessons learned. Most importantly, he began to develop the self-awareness that had been missing from his approach to the job. Over the following weeks, Marcus noticed significant improvements in Thomas's performance. The young man began to anticipate problems before they occurred, rather than simply reacting after they developed. He started paying attention to details that he had previously overlooked. His communication with the security team became more effective and decisive. The real test came during a state visit from a foreign head of government. This was exactly the type of high-stakes event that required flawless security coordination. Marcus decided to observe Thomas's performance carefully, ready to intervene if necessary, but hoping that his mentoring had been effective. Thomas's preparation for the state visit was thorough and professional. He conducted detailed security briefings, coordinated with multiple law enforcement agencies, and personally inspected every aspect of the arrangements. Marcus was impressed by the attention to detail and proactive planning. During the actual visit, Thomas demonstrated the kind of leadership Marcus had been trying to develop. When a protest group gathered unexpectedly near the parade route, Thomas quickly modified the security plan to ensure the visiting dignitary's safety without disrupting the schedule. When a technical problem affected radio communications, Thomas implemented backup procedures smoothly and efficiently. Most importantly, Thomas maintained constant awareness of his team's performance throughout the event. He noticed when guards became distracted or complacent and corrected their behavior immediately. He anticipated potential problems and addressed them before they could develop into serious issues. Marcus watched the entire event with growing satisfaction. Thomas was finally demonstrating the instinctive awareness and decisive leadership that the job required. The young man had learned to think beyond the written procedures and adapt to real-world complexities after the state visit concluded successfully. Marcus felt confident that his mentoring efforts had been worthwhile. Thomas had evolved from a technically competent but inexperienced candidate into a truly professional security leader who could be trusted with the royal family's safety. The transformation hadn't been easy for either of them. Marcus had needed to find ways to provide honest feedback without destroying Thomas's confidence. Thomas had needed to overcome his pride and acknowledge that he had more to learn than he had initially realized. During their final formal mentoring session, Marcus reflected on the progress Thomas had made. The young man who had been defensive about criticism just a few months earlier was now actively seeking feedback and constantly looking for ways to improve his performance. Thomas, for his part, expressed genuine gratitude for Marcus's patience and guidance. He admitted that he hadn't initially understood why the extended mentoring was necessary, but he now realized how much he had learned during the process. He felt much more confident about taking on the full responsibilities of the position. Marcus shared some final insights about the unique challenges of protecting the royal family. He emphasized that the job required not just technical competence, but also the ability to think creatively about potential threats and solutions. He stressed the importance of maintaining constant vigilance while making the royal family feel comfortable and natural in public settings, as their mentoring relationship evolved into a more collegial partnership. Marcus began transferring more responsibilities to Thomas. He reduced his direct involvement in daily operations while remaining available for consultation on complex situations. The transition was gradual and natural, allowing Thomas to build confidence while ensuring continuous security coverage. Lord Chancellor Harrison monitored the progress closely and was pleased with the results. The extended mentoring had achieved its goals without creating public relations problems or undermining confidence in the security arrangements. Thomas had developed into the kind of professional leader the position required, and Marcus had successfully transferred his knowledge and experience to the next generation. As the 6-month mentoring period drew to a close, Marcus felt confident that he could finally step back from his active security role. Thomas had proven himself capable of handling the complex challenges and high-stakes decisions that came with protecting the royal family. The royal family's safety would be in good hands. 6 months after the festival, observation that changed everything, Marcus finally felt ready to complete his transition to the new role. The formal handover ceremony was rescheduled, and this time Marcus was genuinely confident that Thomas was prepared for the responsibility. The ceremony took place in the palace's grand hall, with the royal family in attendance, along with senior palace officials and security staff. Thomas looked composed and professional as he accepted the formal responsibilities of head of royal security. The contrast with his demeanor 6 months earlier was remarkable. During the ceremony, the king personally thanked Marcus for his 15 years of dedicated service and his commitment to ensuring a smooth transition. The king's words carried special meaning because Marcus knew the royal family's safety had truly been his top priority throughout the entire process. Princess Catherine presented Marcus with a special medal recognizing his service, and she whispered a personal thank you for his dedication to their family's protection. These moments made all the challenges and difficult decisions of the past months worthwhile. Thomas's acceptance speech was thoughtful and humble. He acknowledged Marcus's mentoring and expressed his commitment to maintaining the highest standards of security for the royal family. Marcus was pleased to hear genuine humility in Thomas's words, recognizing the growth in character that had accompanied his professional development. After the ceremony, Marcus attended a reception where colleagues and friends congratulated him on his successful career and wished him well in his new role. Many people commented on how smoothly the transition had been managed, not knowing about the drama and hard work that had occurred behind the scenes. Sarah was radiant at the reception, finally able to look forward to having her husband home for dinner most evenings and available for family activities on weekends. Emma, now 14, was proud of her father's recognition and excited about spending more time with him as head of palace security. Marcus would still be involved in protecting the royal family, but his new role focused more on strategic planning and coordination rather than direct operational responsibility. He would work regular hours, have predictable schedules, and be able to balance his professional duties with his family life. Thomas approached Marcus during the reception and privately thanked him again for the extended mentoring. He admitted that he had initially been hurt and confused by the arrangement, but he now understood that it had been essential for his development. He promised to maintain the high standards Marcus had established and to continue learning and growing in the role. Marcus was touched by Thomas's sincerity and felt confident that the young man would honor his commitments. The defensive and overconfident person from 6 months ago had evolved into a thoughtful and capable leader who understood the weight of his responsibilities. In the weeks that followed, Marcus settled into his new routine with satisfaction. His strategic planning work was intellectually challenging and important, but it allowed him to be home for dinner most evenings. He attended Emma's school plays and soccer games, strengthening relationships that had suffered during his years of intensive operational responsibilities. Thomas sent Marcus's regular updates on security operations and occasionally sought advice on complex situations. Marcus was pleased to see that Thomas was managing his responsibilities competently while continuing to develop his skills and judgment. The true validation of the mentoring process came during the annual Winter Festival, exactly 1 year after Marcus's undercover observation. This time, Marcus attended as a regular guest, genuinely enjoying the events without worrying about security arrangements. He watched Thomas coordinate the security operations with the same careful attention Marcus had once applied. The young man had learned to notice subtle details and potential problems that would have escaped his attention a year earlier. During the parade, Marcus observed how Thomas positioned his guards to eliminate blind spots and ensure complete coverage of the route. The security perimeter was tight and professional, with no gaps like the one Marcus had spotted the previous year. Thomas moved constantly throughout the event, monitoring his team's performance and making small adjustments to maintain optimal security. When a child's balloon got caught in a tree near the royal family's viewing area, Marcus watched Thomas handle the situation perfectly. Instead of ignoring the minor distraction, Thomas quickly dispatched a guard to retrieve the balloon and return it to the crying child. The gesture was small, but it demonstrated the kind of situational awareness and public relations sensitivity that distinguished truly professional security operations at the evening gala. Marcus was impressed by how smoothly Thomas managed the complex logistics of protecting the royal family, while allowing guests to enjoy themselves naturally. The security was invisible but effective, exactly as it should be. There were no incidents, no awkward moments, and no signs of the problems that had troubled Marcus during the previous year's event. Most importantly, Marcus could see that Thomas's team respected and trusted their leader. The guards responded quickly to his instructions and seemed confident in his judgment. This was perhaps the best indicator that Thomas had truly grown into the role, because effective security leadership required the complete trust and cooperation of the entire team. As Marcus drove home after the Winter Festival, he reflected on the remarkable journey of the past year. His decision to conduct undercover observation had been controversial and risky, but it had ultimately led to outcomes that benefited everyone involved. Thomas had developed into an excellent security leader who would protect the royal family for many years to come. The royal family's safety was assured by professional, competent security arrangements. The palace administration had managed the transition smoothly, without scandals or public relations problems. Marcus himself had found a way to honor his commitment to the royal family's safety while also creating a better balance between his professional and personal responsibilities. His marriage was stronger, his relationship with Emma was deeper, and his own sense of fulfillment was greater than it had been in years. The experience had taught Marcus important lessons about leadership, mentoring, and the courage required to make difficult decisions. Sometimes protecting the people you serve means making choices that are uncomfortable or inconvenient in the short term, but essential for long-term success. Looking back, Marcus realized that his undercover observation had been about more than just testing Thomas's competence. It had been about understanding his own responsibilities and finding ways to fulfill them, even as his role evolved. The commitment to protect and serve didn't end when titles changed or ceremonies concluded. Years later, Marcus would look back on that spring festival as one of the most important days of his career, not because of any dramatic incident or heroic action, but because it had led him to make decisions that honored his deepest values. While creating opportunities for growth and development for others, Thomas continued to excel in his role, eventually becoming one of the most respected security professionals in the royal service. He never forgot the lessons he learned during his mentoring period, and he applied the same patient, thorough approach when training his own successors years later. The royal family remained safe and secure under Thomas's protection. Public events and private moments, with the confidence that comes from knowing truly professional security. Arrangements are in place. They never knew about the crisis that had been averted through Marcus's careful observation and Lord Chancellor Harrison's wise management. Marcus's story became a quiet legend within the palace security service, while the details remained confidential. New security officers learned about the importance of continuous vigilance, honest assessment, and the courage to speak up when safety might be compromised. The bond between Marcus and Thomas evolved into a lasting professional friendship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. They occasionally met for coffee to discuss security challenges and share insights, continuing the mentoring relationship on an informal basis. In the end, Marcus's decision to pose as a tourist and test his replacement had revealed truths that needed to be acknowledged and addressed. By having the courage to act on his observations and the wisdom to find constructive solutions, he had protected not only the royal family, but also Thomas's career and the integrity of the security service itself. The experience reminded everyone involved that true leadership sometimes requires making difficult decisions that prioritize long-term success over short-term convenience. Marcus's story demonstrated that real commitment to service means being willing to do whatever is necessary to ensure those you protect remain safe, even when it requires personal sacrifice and professional risk.